Hey, fourth grade art friends, it's Mrs. Herbay. We're going to start a new project this week, and it's going to be kind of fun. And we're going to be focusing on typography. And you might say, well, that's an awfully big word. Typography is really letters and words. And believe it or not, artists use words as subjects for their artwork. And we're going to look at a particular artist and how he used words in his artwork and became rather famous for it. And we're also going to be creating our own piece of artwork using a word. So this is a finished example of what we're going to be working towards. I chose the word love, but I have a whole list of words that you can choose from. And what you're going to be thinking about is your wish for the world right now. If you could make a wish for the world, what would you wish for the world that you think would make it a better place? So this week, what we're going to do is we're going to work on this really cool sort of tie-dye looking background for our piece of artwork. So what you're going to do is you're going to grab your packet that I sent home to you. You should have a bag that is full of tissue. You should have 4 poster board squares, which I think you should just paper clip those together and put those aside. And we're just going to need this piece of white paper. We're also going to need today, the only other thing we're going to need is try to find like a cracker box or some type of scratch paper or even a piece of foil that you can use to put your piece of paper on. The reason being is that we are going to be using water with this tissue, and so that you don't make a mess all over your house or your parents' table. This could serve like as a little placemat. So it can be really anything that you have. So what you're going to need besides a little placemat, your paper, and you're just going to need a little cup of water, not a lot of water, and you're going to need a brush. It doesn't have to be a very big brush. And so go gather up all that stuff and we'll get started. All right, guys, so we're ready to get started. What I would encourage you to do is kind of take your tissue out of the bag and kind of spread it out a little bit and see all the colors that are available, because you might want to, it'll make it easier for you as you start to think about laying the colors down once we get started. My tissue is blowing around right now a little bit. So what we're going to do is, in order for this to work, the paper needs to be wet. So if you just took this piece of tissue and tried to stick it down onto the paper, it's not going to stick, right? And the magic of this tissue is it's called bleeding art tissue. And what that means is that the colors that dyed the tissue, the particular color that it is, will bleed when they're wet, which means they will release from the piece of tissue and they will go into the water. And because this is sitting on a piece of paper, then it will transfer onto the paper. All right. So what you're going to do first is I'll show you to get started. Choose a corner. Okay. And what I like to do is just sort of brush. You don't have to get the whole piece of paper wet, but brush kind of a little area. It doesn't, again, the paper doesn't have to be sopping wet, but you want it wet enough so that when you stick the paper, it sticks down, okay? Then it's also important to then take your paintbrush that's dipped in water and paint back over this piece of tissue, okay? And as you can see some of the pigment of the tissue coming out and bleeding onto the paper, all right? If you want to rinse your brush a little bit in your water so that you don't smear the rest of the color all over, that's fine. You may want to evenly put your squares. I'm kind of a random girl, so what I like to do is, again, I'm going to make sure where I'm sticking this blue piece. So you can overlap, which means you can put a piece of tissue over the other piece of tissue and see what you get. Again, try not to just rush through this and do it fast, or your paper is not going to look probably as cool as it could. So I did that, and then I'm just going to continue working my way out, and I'm going to think about what colors do I want to be with one another. And since I have some blues going on here, blues and kind of violets, I'm going to add this here, and you can see it's kind of overlapping over there onto the red or the pinkish color. Now I'm going to move up into here, wet this area a little bit. I'm going to take a green square. I also want to make sure that I'm covering up all of the white space of the paper, of the background paper. And there's my green. That was really bleeding, so I'm going to kind of rinse it off a little bit. Then I might want to take a light blue. So you get the idea. It doesn't, the other nice thing about this is you don't have to rush through it. You can just take your time and keep going. I'm going to move out from down here. Again, don't forget to get your paper wet. Oops, this piece blew onto here. So I'm going to grab it off. And then again, I'm going to go back over it. Okay, so you're just going to keep doing this until you have your whole paper filled. What I would encourage you to do is not to, I know you're like, oh, I want to see the magic. I would encourage you to leave this on until the paper is completely dry. That way, the most amount of pigment will be able to transfer to your paper, okay? I'm gonna stop the video and make this go in fast motion. So I'm gonna finish this piece of paper, but so that you don't have to sit here for a long time and watch me stick all my papers on. I'll do that, and then I'll come back on and I'll explain to you the next step. All right, so I was able to cover my whole entire paper with my tissue, and you can see lots of bleeding has occurred, and I'm just going to leave this tissue on here probably for, I don't know, probably for an hour or two. And what's going to happen is the tissue will start to dry and it will start to peel away from the paper. Okay, so let's let this dry. I kind of feel like we're on a cooking show, you know, where they like put the food in the oven and then they come back and it's all done. So we're going to let this dry for a little bit, and then I'm going to come back and show you how to take off the tissue. All right, guys, my tissue has now dried, and you can see because it's starting to really lift off the paper. So what you're going to do is you're just going to carefully start to pull the tissue back, and you can see there might be areas where it wasn't quite wet when you put the tissue down, so it didn't transfer to the paper, but that adds to the coolness of it. And I'm just slowly peeling off all my papers. And here you have it. Now, once you're finished and the paper's dry, you might want to just put this under a couple heavy books. It'll flatten it right out, and then it'll be ready to use for next week. This is the list of words that I've attached in Canvas. You don't necessarily need to print this out, but you can take a look at it and you can start to think about what might be one of the words that you're going to choose next week. Put these squares in a safe place, because these are what we're going to use to create the letters for our project, so we're going to need those. And again, this is kind of what we're working towards. The cool thing is that the background will then show through our letters. So again, we're going to talk a little bit about positive and negative space next week. So I hope you had fun with this. If you have extra tissue and maybe you had more white spaces, you could put the tissue, you could wet it and put another piece of tissue down and let it fill in the white spaces. It's up to you. But I hope you enjoy this, and I look forward to talking to you guys on Monday.